Welcome to episode 3 of the Take 2 podcast, where today we will be discussing our top 5 Bong Joon Ho films in honor of his latest film, Mickey 17. By the way, I'm going to get his name wrong like 1,000 times. But Mickey 17 that just
Bong
released.
Joon Ho.
Bong Joon Ho. Okay, got it. My name is Sam, and I'm joined by my co-host, Kenny. We are both massive film and TV junkies, and we are here to discuss, debate, and depress you with our takes today. Today on the podcast, we are actually filming a little later than normal because Kenny had to go on vacation to North Carolina. He was checking out March Madness. Very cool. How
Yeah,
are the
yeah,
games out there,
getting
Kenny?
it was pretty electric. It was my first ever Duke game, and let me tell you, those Duke fans have some culty traditions. They like
Yeah.
yelling at people. They dance to every time. What was it? I don't know. They dance to stupid songs, but it was fun. It was a good time. Yeah.
Good, good. I'm glad to hear it. And we are going to dive into what we missed on Toy Story episode, maybe even a little something of what we missed from the Spider-Man episode. We're going to do a quick new segment called Still Holds Up, and then we're going to finally get into the meat of the episode, which is going to be ranking our top 5 Boon John Ho movies. Did I
Bong
know that?
Joon Ho.
Bong Joon Ho movies? Okay. You know
Yeah,
what?
yeah, yeah.
It's confusing. But yeah, so let's start out. Kenny, you had something regarding Toy Story 5 that we didn't cover on our last episode, so hit me with this.
Yes. So last episode we had said that I was going to get your instant reaction takes on the synopsis of the Toy Story 5 film. So this movie comes out 2026. It's being directed by the guy who has actually written the previous four movies, or at least was part of the writer's room
Okay.
for the previous four movies. Um, and so I think this is his directorial debut. Don't quote me on that,
Oh,
but I'm pretty
wow.
sure. But
Okay.
here's the premise for the movie.
Okay.
This is from Wikipedia.
I'm
The
visualizing
toys
it.
are the toys are back in Disney and Pixar's Toy Story 5, and this time around it's toy meets tech. Buzz, Woody, Jesse, and the rest of the uh, gang's jobs get exponentially harder we're tired, y'all. Jobs get exponentially harder when they go head to head with this new threat to playtime. So, toy meets tech, basically, you know,
Hmm.
what is a standard toy that you would buy from Toys R Us supposed to do when there's cool apps like Candy Crush? And is Clash still a big thing? Do people Clash like
I
Clash of
haven't seen it
Clans?
as much, but around my high schoolers, but some of them I think still do. It's a lot of
Okay, okay.
what I've noticed from my high schoolers is they'll all be playing whatever the top new game is for like a month, and then they'll go to the next one. And a lot of them also play
Yeah.
a lot of those like idle farming games or idle city games or idle
Oh,
games
yeah,
like
like an
that. Like
Animal
the
Crossing kind of.
right, but like really low brow versions of it. So it's like hard to see them playing those games. I'm like, oh, just spend
Listen,
$2 and buy this game. It's so much better. And they're like, I'm not spending real money on this. And I'm like, you are
this
spending 80 hours on this game. Spend $2
this
on it.
generation will never understand the hype of Flappy Bird.
That is
Do you
so
remember
true.
Flappy Bird? I
Yes.
remember waking up at like 5 a.m., like getting on my iPod and
Yes.
like
Fruit
playing
Ninja.
Flappy
Fruit
Bird
Ninja.
for
Brick Breakers.
Angry
Some
Birds.
Angry
Yeah.
Birds, yes, Angry Birds. Okay, my response to that, the Toy Story 5 premise, that could actually be really cool. That could actually be really
No.
fun. Yeah, if they
No.
can make it, I'm really interested to see what they do with it. You know, a lot of obviously I just had a baby like 6 months ago, and I've had friends who have babies, and it's like everybody has the same idea that are like don't show screens to your kids at young ages and keep phones out of
Right.
their hands as long as possible. So like we're all kind of doing it right now, and it's really hard because we're also on our phones and on screens all the time that it's like tough to keep them away from it. So I do think it's interesting if they could work it out. I wonder like if the apps are going to take on personalities. Is that going to be a thing? Is the phone going to be its own personality? Like, is the phone going to be a villain? I don't know. That's actually you actually surprised me with the hypnosis, and I'm more interested in it than I thought I was going to be. To be completely honest, I'm actually interested in it, considering I hated Toy Story 4. So
Yeah, yeah. See, and that's kind of where it goes back to for me is Toy Story 4 felt so rote and felt so creatively bankrupt in a way. Like it still had some really, really good ideas and it was well made and beautiful in terms of the animation style, but I don't have a lot of hope that in in take two of there's this
oh,
next,
very nice.
they're taking another stab at this series. I just don't. It just sounds really gimmicky. Again, it could be super duper tired, right? Be like, oh, kids these days don't know X. I mean, kind of like what we just did, right? We just soliloquized about Flappy Bird and Clash of Clans, but I don't know. I'm super doubtful. I think it sounds kind of silly. But
If
I hear
you're
your point.
doubtful, I'm concerned because you're the most optimistic movie viewer ever. So it makes sense that if the one
Yeah.
thing that you are not looking forward to, I actually have now a slight interest in. So good job.
If we learned anything about my judgment from last week and my fandom of not Sporky, but Forky, then maybe I'm not the best judge of character for these things. So we'll see. We'll see.
Um, who can say? Forky is an instant classic
I
in
think so.
someone's mind. I had a friend who listened to the podcast. He's a diehard Spider-Man fan, and he immediately afterwards said he loved the episode, but he was like, "Who do you think would win between Spider-Man's fighting, and who's the best Spider-Man?" And he came at me, and I actually agreed with what he said. He said, one, Andrew Garfield is the best Spider-Man. He said, two, in a fight between the three of them with no tech advantages anywhere, he wins the fight. And I gotta say, I think I agree with him. So 1 minute conversation here, but I'm also gonna lay down that I like Andrew Garfield. And I think if there were a fight, he wins the fight.
Yeah, character versus grit are two slightly different things in my
Yes.
mind. So,
Yes.
from a character perspective, I just don't think that either of the two lives up to my understanding of the character Peter Parker more than Tom Holland. And so I think from a character perspective, he is still the best Spider-Man. Or, I mean, I love the Spider-Verse movies, so I'm a big Miles Morales fan. Um, but in terms of who would win in a fight between those three,
Yes.
I
Who would win the
absolutely agree.
fight?
I do think that it's Andrew Garfield. He just like, especially post Gwen Stacy death, Andrew Garfield,
No,
the
yeah.
man's unhinged, you know?
Yeah.
You have to get him in the right point of the timeline, but you can even tell in No Way Home that he's still so broken over it. So if you make him snap, he's done for. He's villain mode.
He definitely has the most edge of the three, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I wanted to cover there. That's it's definitely missed from the last two episodes. Quick segment, we'll call it Still Holds Up. So, a movie you've seen recently that you hadn't seen in a very long time that still holds up in your mind.
Yes.
Kenny, go.
So I rewatched this movie with Jenna a few months ago, and it was a movie that was on repeat in my house, especially in like middle school. It is Robert Downey Jr.'s Sherlock Holmes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
the movie is still incredibly good. I still get super pumped up where he goes into his mind palace,
Slow
his like
motion.
combat mind
Oh,
palace, and he's
so
just
cool.
like breaking ribs and like choking a guy out, and it's so good. And then also just I love that world that they created of
Hmm.
London, where I feel like they encapsulated the steampunk vibe very effectively
Oh,
without it
so
feeling
well.
campy.
Yes.
Um, and he just plays such a um this we try not to cuss on this podcast. He just plays such an a-hole so well. I mean,
Yeah.
he is
He's so
Robert Downey
clever
Jr.,
and
right? And
so
so he's so
witty.
good at that.
Oh,
And
so good.
he just comes across as like a coked up maniac who is also smarter than everybody else and knows it. It's really good. And
Nails it.
Jude Law has had a lot of really, really good roles, but that's the first time I had met him. And so that's always going to hold a place in my heart for Jude Law roles.
So I'm so glad you said this movie because this was one of my favorite movies growing up. I saw it when it premiered in theaters. I'm a massive Sherlock Holmes fan. I have um, literally like every Sherlock Holmes book behind me, and I've read them all.
Yeah.
And far and away, to me, the best cast, the best capturing of the Sherlock Holmes world with
Yeah.
modern filming techniques. I hear a lot of people, and I've seen, I think, the first two seasons of Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch, and they're good,
Hmm.
and they're cool modern adaptations, but they do not come close to these movies, one or two. And I love both films so much.
Yeah.
There's been rumors about a third for so long, and it just hasn't come to
Hmm.
fruition. But I actually was watching Sherlock Holmes a few months ago when Lauren's mom was up here and to rewatch it because she had never seen it, and I couldn't hear because my speaker wasn't good enough, and the movie was so good I was so upset that it wasn't coming through, and I didn't feel like they were capturing his wit and cleverness, that I was secondhand
Yeah.
annoyed that the next day I went out and bought like $150 like Bluetooth soundbar
Yeah.
just because of that movie. So
Right.
that is a
Also,
great call out.
that soundtrack
Oh,
is
so
a
good.
sleeper great soundtrack. I don't think people think about the Sherlock Holmes soundtrack, but you hear those first like 5 notes like do
Isn't
do do
that
do.
Hans Zimmer as well?
I believe it is, yeah.
Yeah.
It's Guy Ritchie, Hans Zimmer. Guy Ritchie's
And Guy
also was
Ritchie
the
just
perfect,
nails it.
yeah.
Yeah, Guy
Was a
Ritchie.
perfect director and that
Oh,
like his style, that like that gritty style that he nails so well is incredible.
that's such a great pick.
What's
Okay, mine's like a little it's gonna be a little bit more of a throwback, and I would almost call it's definitely a classic now. Came out in 1994, rewatched it on Netflix the other day, starring Macaulay Culkin. No, not Home Alone. Richie Rich. I rewatched, and it is actually just a dime family movie from beginning to end. I'm not even joking. It's so charming and wonderful, and I remember watching it as a kid, and I loved it, but I was like I didn't fully understand it, like what was going on exactly, because it seemed so out there, like this family with all these mega millions. It was kind of a weird plot, but rewatching it, I actually thoroughly enjoyed it. So shameless plug. I know I sound like not a like film fanatic or critic, but what a great family film. And I will also say it encapsulates just the middle of the 1990s when like family films were just at a peak, and there was just this charm integrated into all of them, and there were like child stars like Macaulay Culkin, and he just
right.
flashes on screen and everything he says is like hits all of his lines, and he's adorable, and somehow it all works out.
Yeah.
So
The 90s kid actor is really fascinating because I don't know if it's just because the movie was more properly written for the child actor to where it didn't come across so terrible, but you compare child actors of the 90s to, this is not the case across the board, but a lot of the child actors I see in movies now is just kind of like, I feel like they're just misplaced
they
and the
feel
movie was not properly made for them.
yes, a lot of child actors nowadays miss so hard that I have to just turn off the TV. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's such poor acting or writing that I can't even do it. But
Yeah.
all I'm
Have you
saying
seen
is,
the
all I'm saying is, don't knock Richie Rich until you rewatch it. And I bet if you watch that movie with your wife Jenna, she will actually love that movie today.
yeah.
That's all I'm gonna say.
Guaranteed she would be totally charmed by it. It's been forever since I've seen it. Yeah, the have you seen the trailer for the new Lilo Stitch movie?
I haven't.
Live
I've
action?
been avoiding it to be honest.
Yeah. It's like nightmare fuel for two reasons. One, Stitch sort of never come alive. It's really freaky. And two, again, like it's not the kid actor's fault. I just don't think that the movie it has that Disney veneer over it that just
Mm.
exists in all of their movies, and it doesn't. it doesn't want to be campy, but that's like where the 90s kids movies landed so well, is
Yeah,
that like
100%.
that charm and that simplicity and that anachronization of life is so great. And yeah, it's a hard trailer to watch. Not pumped for that movie,
Okay.
but we'll keep on rolling.
Okay, so that's awesome. Sherlock Holmes, Richie Rich. If you haven't watched those recently, go check them out. Let us know what you think. Now we are going to move in to ranking the top 5 Bong Joon Ho films. Nailed it. I
Yes,
spent the
well done.
last like 2 weeks going over a lot of these films, watching some of them for the first time, and these were my favorite viewings so far, even though we're only 3 episodes in. I loved like so many of these films, and I'm just so excited to talk about them. And that's why I'm just like so annoyed that you've been gone for a week and a half, because I've been sitting on these films just wanting to talk about them nonstop, and
Yes.
Lauren hasn't watched them with me, so I'm just like, I need to
Yours, what
talk
are
to
you doing
Kenny
with all
about
these
this.
ideas?
Yeah, exactly. And they're
Yeah.
just bouncing around. So let's start from number 5 and work our way up. And why don't you give me your fifth favorite Bong Joon Ho film?
Okay. Yes, and I'm actually in the exact same boat as you, to where I had seen two or three of these movies
Same.
previously, and this is my first viewing of a lot of them. And I feel like I, as a movie fan, have done myself a disservice by not watching these movies earlier. So,
And you saying that, let me just step in really quick. For anyone listening, and I know this is a really niche podcast, Bong Joon Ho film reviews. I think anyone who loves film will have seen some of these movies or will want to go
mhm,
watch some of these movies. I think because he's a South Korean director, he's and a lot of his films are foreign, that
mhm,
most people will have not seen many, or some will have not seen any of these films. And I hate to say it because we only have 7 subscribers on our YouTube channel. But honestly, we're going to do our best not to spoil these, but it's going to be hard not to, because we're going to dive into some of the plots because they're
mhm.
so intense. If you haven't seen these movies, I would honestly just pause the podcast, go watch some of these films, and come back. I
Yeah.
know that's probably the worst thing I could possibly say for the growth of our podcast, but they're all so good that that's all I have to say about that. Sorry, go
Right.
ahead with your fifth film.
No, I 100% agree. And if people aren't familiar with Bong Joon-ho, I would go and watch the snippet of his Oscar acceptance speech for his movie Parasite, which won Best Picture. He talks a lot about the barrier to getting, foreign movies to us, foreign films
Mm-hmm.
made and getting them recognized. And he said that the biggest barrier are the black lines underneath the screen where you're reading subtitles. And
That's fair.
I would just encourage people who haven't watched movies that aren't in English, that you will focus way more in any of these movies. You will feel these movies a lot more viscerally. You will come away with so much more. And so start there. You can get a sense for who he is, and then go watch these
It's
movies.
very true.
But
That's a great point.
my my number five movie of his that I watched is this movie called The Host.
Okay.
So
Me too.
things
Me
that,
too. The Host is
yeah,
also my fifth. So I'm just going to put that out there right now. We both have the same
perfect.
fifth.
Perfect. This movie is the second one of his that I had watched during this rewatch, or this was my first time watching this movie, and it was really good. Considering when it came out, the actual host, the mutant fish
Mm-hmm.
thing, I actually think plays incredibly well. I think it looks really, really good. Everything that has to do with the Han River and just kind of how they build out the world of sewers and these little districts and the parks and all the things is really interesting. Bong Joon-ho also really has a gift for um, depicting families in a way that feels really believable.
Yes.
Um, there's most of his movies have a lot of dysfunctional families in a way that brings a lot of laughter, at least to
Mhm.
me. It's one of those things where when I'm watching this movie, I'm like, okay, am I laughing at something just because I'm an American watching a foreign film, or am I laughing at it because it's intentionally funny? And I've come to the conclusion that he's just like, he has a really great sense of humor. He's a really, really funny
He
guy.
does. Yeah. It's a
Yeah,
lot of dark humor too.
right, right. It's a lot of dark humor, but I even think about there's a scene in this movie where one of the guys is he's being quarantined basically, and his family trying to make him escape, and there's this whole just like montage of them trying to escape this hospital and all like the nonsense, because the family is made up of this dad and his son. The son had a hard upbringing, seems to be kind of neurodivergent or somewhere on the spectrum. um a second son who is a college dropout jerk, and then a daughter who is a bronze medalist
Archery.
Olympic archer.
Yeah.
So it's just this really fascinating combo,
Yes.
and the key character of the whole movie is the granddaughter, um, Gongdu's daughter, and she gets taken by the host, and then all the antics move forward, and they just do a really good job. They have, even in the midst of this like monster movie and kind of, it's not really a horror movie. I didn't really find it very scary,
Hmm.
but it's a very thrilling movie. But in the middle of it, you still have this family like sitting down, eating dinner, having whatever, or just snacking in this weird trailer, and really, really good. Again, CGI is great. This movie does hit a little bit differently post-COVID because it talks about
Oh,
how
yes,
like,
I wanted to talk about that.
yeah, there's like an American intervention into this movie where they're the whole, to spoil the movie.
Well, and to be fair, quick question. Is Bong Joon Ho clairvoyant? And was this movie a message to the future? I'm just honest
I've
question.
I've seen two movies similar to this recently. I was also watching Steven Soderbergh's Contagion, and both these movies were made pre-COVID, and you're like, whoa, this movie just is a little scary coming on the other side. But basically, the American intervention is saying, hey, there's this the problem is that there is a huge fish monster in the Han River,
Yes.
but they are going and basically performing chemical warfare up and down the banks of the Han River to eliminate this virus, which in the movie doesn't exist. And the doctor knows that because he was never able to find proof of it. That, my opinion, that's not the clairvoyant part. Not what we're saying. But Sam, we made it. What are we? Sam is very sneakily trying to get me canceled 25 minutes
I
into
didn't
this
say anything.
podcast.
I didn't say anything. But what did Bong Joon Ho say through his
But
film?
it's also that intervention, and American intervention in his movies often takes a very interesting path. So, without spoiling the whole movie, because I know not a lot of people have seen these movies, that is where I landed. In that last scene where there's the protest and they drop it's not mustard gas, but it's
Hmm.
agent,
Agent
it's
Orange or
Agent
something? Yeah,
47 or
yeah, something
something,
weird,
and
yeah.
something that clearly does not actually work against the host. It does not solve the actual problem, but it's super deadly and critical to all of these people. It's
It's just
powerful.
okay. So my thoughts on the host is I liked it. I didn't love it, but I liked
Yeah.
it, and I thought it ran a little long. I thought there were a lot of going into buildings, trying to sneak away from people, getting captured, having to escape, getting captured again, having to escape again, like this struggle. And it was his first big movie, like on a grand scale, and it kind of feels that way where he's like, oh, I have a
Hmm.
budget and I'm gonna kind of stretch the minutes out and I'm gonna use some
Yeah.
CGI and like you said, this monster is borderline not holding up, but it does just
Yeah.
barely. It works just barely, and it's gonna work forever because of that. But it is borderline CGI around that time where if it looked really bad, I don't think the movie holds up as much. The main
Agreed.
character, who is just a total, like, I know the granddaughter's main character, but also like the main character who, that's his daughter, I believe. What's his name?
Yes.
What's his name?
Gongdu.
Gondu is, and this is the humor. This is the best part of the film. His undeniability to f things up unintentionally over and over again, like, makes you want to cry at
It
certain
does.
times. Like there are real ramifications every time he screws something up, like life or death
Yeah.
ramifications. And that's kind
It's
of just,
heartbreaking.
it's
It's
heartbreaking.
it's heartbreaking, the two moments when he reaches back and he grabs who he
Yep.
thinks is his
Yeah.
daughter's hand as
Yeah.
just some random
Yeah.
girl,
And then
and his daughter gets taken off and starts off the whole movie, and then the second one being miscounting the
the
bullets that he
bullets.
had
Oh
left.
man. I hate to even like, yeah.
It's
So
devastating.
I almost don't want to spend too much time on the host. Would I
Hmm.
recommend it? I'd recommend it fifth among his
Agreed.
films, which means
Yeah.
it's pretty low down there. It's not bad, not good, but okay.
Yeah.
Let's move
Yeah,
on. Oh,
I gave
sorry.
it 3.5,
Okay.
and I agree. It feels a lot like he was figuring a lot of things out and he was experimenting, which is really fun to
Yeah.
watch for someone who's clearly a really good filmmaker to kind of
Yes.
like test his craft in different ways.
Yes.
It does feel a little disorganized. It feels like it runs wrong, but runs long, but the last 15 minutes are just
Great.
elevated.
And
They're
like
awesome.
all of his films, they come full circle super well, and the endings are always very satisfying and memorable.
Right.
Um, so that's gonna bring me to my fourth favorite. All
Hmm.
right, what am I gonna say, Kenny? What am I gonna
What are you
say
gonna
here?
say?
Okay, it is Mother. I
Oh,
believe it was
interesting.
released in 2009, and
Hmm.
watched this the other day. It's a neo noir film, so it's pretty heavy. It's gonna follow like one character, usually. On like, neo noir is gonna follow a character in sort of a introspective, exploratory
Inner
journey, inner
monologue sort of thing.
monologue, like a lot of tough, oftentimes moral decisions and
Lots of rain.
lots of rain. Yes, if it's neo noir, there's gonna be rain and muted colors. And let me tell you, I started this film, didn't know what to expect, really didn't know anything about it. I read like the one sentence premise, which is this mother has a son who is mentally handicapped to an extent, and he is accused of murder. And she does not believe that he's committed this murder. So this film follows her journey trying to absolve him of those crimes and free him.
Hmm.
This movie has like haunted me for the last week because it is unbelievable filmmaking from beginning to end. Every object in the film, every character in the film is so just Bong Joon Ho in a nutshell. And let me explain what I mean by that before we go further. Because even though the host does this well, I think the rest of these movies do it at like a level 10. What
Hmm.
makes him a great director is you do not know if an object in the film is going to have significance or not,
Hmm.
like symbolic significance. You do not know if a character that appears to be a main character is going to remain a main character, or how
Yeah.
pivotal they are going to be to the movie, or if they are going to survive or perish in the film. And I'm not just talking about the last 5-10 minutes of a film. He is one of the only directors I've ever seen that creates these main characters that have pivotal roles in films that could die or just drop out of the film
Yeah.
halfway through the film, a third of the way into
Hmm.
the film, which makes his movies so good and so unexpected.
Yeah.
And this movie, like you mentioned, the last one, typical to most of his films, family is at the center of it, relationships are at the center of it. And specifically, you would think the relationship between this mother and her mentally handicapped son it's since it's only one relationship that's tying the crux of this film together,
Hmm.
we could understand it quickly. And as the movie goes on, for the entire running time, that relationship evolves. And
Yeah.
everything in the film, after like 15, no, I will say this about his films. They usually take about 30 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes to really get going
Yeah.
because he's setting everything up. That could be a barrier to his films. They do have slow starts.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean they're poorly filmed by any means. And his payoffs are always worth the slow starts. And
Yeah.
this to me was just a prime example of we're winding everything up. We're getting to know some characters, the village, the setting. Something's going to happen that's going to set the spark off in this film.
Yeah.
And for the last hour and 15 minutes of around this 2 hour film, I was locked in and enamored. And of all his films, I think of all of them, I had the most gasps almost, or moments where I
Hmm.
was just like, oh my. Like
Right.
I can't even believe what I'm watching right now. From a scene to
Yes.
scene, over and over. Like as I'm absorbing the scene I just watched, the next scene is hitting me with something that I forgot
Oh yeah.
about from 45 minutes ago that's coming
Yes.
full circle and punching me in the gut. So,
I think if you were to track, if you were to graph Bong Joon-ho's movies, it really is like the plot is like an exponential curve
yes,
to where it's
yes.
it's accelerating, and I think that you see that in this movie in particular. This movie is actually tied. It's a smuggle for me. I'm calling this movie a smuggle for me because it was so hard for me to nail down exactly where I wanted to put it on this list, and I've run into this issue twice.
This was the hardest movie
Um,
for me to rank as well.
yeah.
Because, and I'll say before you go on, the reason it was so hard for me to rank is it is right up there, I think, with his best films. But did
Mhm.
I walk away feeling good from it? Like I just watched Richie Rich. I don't know. I don't know if I felt good about it. Like
Right.
I didn't feel happy coming out of this movie,
Yeah.
but I can't
But I
deny
think
how
that
good it
fits
was.
the neo-noir thing
It
too,
does,
right?
100%,
Is
100%.
you don't know it's not always a
Every time
happy
I watch a
story.
neo noir movie, I walk away a little more depressed. Go
Yeah.
ahead. I cut you off.
No, I 100% agree. It's you can watch it in all of his movies where the scenes I actually the vibe I get from the scenes, maybe that's more accurate, is they get shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. Like each
Mm.
individual scene, like it starts long, it's doing its exposition, it's getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and then all of a sudden, like all hell breaks loose, and you're it's hard to keep the pace. But the even the developing and trying to gauge where the mother is at in all these different relations. Like the scene that sticks with me is where she gets the club that she thinks is covered in blood, and
Oh,
turns out
yes.
it's just
What a
covered
great
in
scene.
lipstick.
By the way, can we
Yeah.
give a shout out to Toy Story 2? Because that is the Cheeto scene from Toy Story
Yes.
2, is
I
that
had that
scene.
exact same thought where she's
Yes.
like stepping over and she
Yes.
knocks over the water in that. This is some of his best cinematography in my mind,
Hmm.
to where there's different scenes. A lot of it has to actually do with water, I think, in this movie. There's two scenes that stick
Yeah.
out to me. One is this water, like a close-up shot of this water pooling up around the sleeping guy's hand, and you wonder if he's gonna wake up and you're just, you're
You just
sweating watching
reminded
this
me of
movie.
something. You just reminded me of something in the movie. I can't even. Oh, he's
Yeah.
this is this movie is so well directed, and I think you're right. So well shot. I can't even.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But then that same guy like shows up at her house in the next, or like in two scenes, and you're like, holy crap, what's happening? Is he actually the murderer? And then her relationship with him is also evolving because he like takes all the money that she was saving to pay off her debt, and then also say, hey, I actually do think that your son is framed, and let's think about this.
Yeah.
Bong Joon-ho also does focus a lot on the very strange. I think that he focuses a lot on like Korean police corruption because
Hmm.
there's two things that happen in two of these movies, one which we'll talk about later. But a lot of it is trying to coerce a story out of someone and try to like pin
Yes,
a
there is a lot of
scapegoat on
that in
someone
his films for sure.
who cannot defend themselves, like
Right,
this kid who, he confesses to the murder even though he knows he didn't do it because they basically gave him a script.
right,
And then the second thing is the reenactment where the accused reenacts the crime that happens in two of these movies as
right,
well.
right.
And it's very clearly it sits wrong with you where there's just like this public
Yes.
reenaction. You're like, oh
Also,
man.
I just want to throw this out there because you said this and it just reminded me, and I didn't realize this initially. But you're talking about that water that was spilled over and how it ties in when this guy shows up and there's rain and it's raining.
Yeah.
Two things. One, this is a great example of what he does as a filmmaker. That in most American films, by most directors, I would say that guy shows up, he threatens the lady, he leaves, and he is our antagonist for the rest of the film. We're still going after him, and we just didn't get him with the club, right?
Hmm.
This is what makes him a great director. This guy shows up after being accused of something, has a really complicated relationship now with her, he was the mentally handicapped son only friend, but also like didn't fully
A
treat him
total
right all
jerk
the
to
time.
him.
Yeah, right. But then also says, "Hey, I'll help you," which
Yeah.
like his films just take the greatest twist like that. The other thing I'm going to
Yeah.
say is you just reminded me, and I don't know if you've thought about this, but the pool of water on the ground and she's staring down at it. And now I think later into the film, there's another pool of something later on that
Mm.
she's looking down on. And just to think where we've come from her sneaking around to other things happening later in the film. Okay. You didn't.
Yeah.
So where is this film ranked
So
for you?
this movie is a smuggle and is tied with four for this movie. I don't even know where to rank it. That's kind of where I landed. It was very, very hard. I
It's
ended up it
you gotta have
it
some
smuggles in,
ranking for
but
it. We're ranking the movies.
yeah, okay, four. Okay, so it's
Okay.
it's tied
So
for
we're
me with
tied. We
four.
also had Mother at 4. We both had
Yes,
Mother
the
at
other
4.
movie I also had at four though was Snowpiercer. So
Okay. So
really
how many
like
movies do you have?
Snow.
Do you have 5 or 6 movies?
I have six.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Okay.
Breaking the rules.
I know. I know. I did. But there were I couldn't stop watching. So, um,
Okay. Let's wait.
Snowpiercer.
Let's wait on Snowpiercer for now then. And let's just
Okay.
table it for now since we both had Mother. So what was your third favorite film?
My third favorite film of his is Parasite.
Okay. Wow. I really, really believed Parasite was going to be your first favorite film as an
Mhm.
awards guy and everything like that. I just thought that movie was going to be a shoo-in for you as his
Yeah.
best film.
This movie is wonderful. I can't even really name specific faults in this movie. There's things that don't make me feel good in this movie. Actually, most of it, you kind of walk away just being very unsettled because it's this family who is super down on their luck and they find this in basically being household employees of this rich family and through fraud, they work their way into getting into this family and they step over the heads of others. They get other people fired so they can take positions. The whole movie is incredibly frenetic. You sympathize with the family because the position that they're in is so desperate and terrible. They live in a basement that ends up getting half flooded because they didn't close the windows. They leave the windows open at points in
The
order
gas comes in.
to get free fumigation to get rid of the cockroaches.
There's that
Their
dark
whole
humor.
Yeah, there's this whole business of folding pizza boxes, which is pretty funny.
That is funny.
This is also a movie that has that same exponential
100%.
pace, right?
100%.
Once it's very slow and methodical, and they're very smart about how they're bringing in each family member, but then when the what do you even call that thing? Cave bunker. When the
Yeah.
bunker
The
is
basement
revealed,
bunker,
that's when
yeah.
the movie starts doing this. And you're like,
It's
what
a
is
total
happening?
when that is revealed, it's a complete game changer. There are
Yeah.
few times in a film where something like that has occurred that has changed the entire perspective and landscape of the movie. And I
Yeah.
think there's few directors that have even done what he did in that movie, and that was go from
Mhm.
what was almost a comedy film for 45 minutes. Like we said, it's like that 30, 45
Yeah.
minutes, that build up. We learn the characters.
Kind of similar to The Host in that way, actually.
Yeah, yeah. Similar to The Host. And it's just that turn, like the housekeeper who they got fired beforehand shows up, and when you see her on the Ring camera, something completely changes as a viewer. You're just like,
Yeah.
whoa, what is going on here? And you just get
Yeah.
this unsettledness.
Yeah.
So
The
go
movie
go
goes
ahead.
from the movie goes from a heist vibe to a thriller vibe
Yes.
at that moment.
To and then don't forget comedy, thriller, horror.
Yes. The horror is, and the more I think it, the movie, the name Parasite actually landed the best with me in terms of how he has named all of his movies, just because the
Yes, I
parasitic
agree.
relationship here is truly central to the whole dynamic that everyone has is this family that's down on the luck is being a parasite of this rich family, is taking advantage of the mom who just doesn't have very good judgment and just will like believe anybody. But it's also showing that hey, there are other people out there who are desperate enough. That's the old housekeeper. Oh shoot, dude, my light just went out. Well, that's exciting. Um, give me one second.
I'll continue talking here.
Yeah.
The yeah, really interesting thing about the Parasite title. I totally agree. It's the best title. It's the most fitting. I didn't even think about that, so I think that's a great point. But it also, like so many of his films, his protagonists are not necessarily good people.
Yeah.
And like you said, we sympathize with them due to their situation, but there
Mm-hmm.
are also they always show their worst human
Yeah.
nature comes out always. And that's what spoils all of this is these people's greed and
Mm-hmm.
inability to feel like they now have enough or they have a good enough
Yeah.
life. They press the issue in almost out of spite from where they've come, and they can't let
Right.
that go.
Yeah. It I to me it's we talked a few weeks ago about how I don't watch House of the Dragon because of this weird veil of moral ambiguity or
Hmm.
complexity,
Hmm.
right? And I actually think that Bong Joon Ho does this far more effectively because your sympathy is not deadened by what they do. They seem just truly very human.
Hmm.
They make poor decisions. They do get too greedy. There's that scene in particular, right, where the entire family is finally alone in the house
It's
together.
a great scene. It's a great scene.
They're going all out. The son is basically conspiring on how he's going to end up marrying the daughter and then end up taking over this house.
Hmm.
And it's all out of desperation because they were truly in dire straits.
Yes.
And those dire straits are the same. That's the not exact same position, but it's a very similar situation to what the old housekeeper has with her husband, who lives in the bunker.
I will say, for those of you who don't know, the main actor, the dad from this film, is in like three or four of
Yeah,
uh, Bong Joon Ho's
yeah,
movies, and he crushes it every single
he's
time.
so good.
So he's amazing as always, and I also
Yeah,
thought of the family members, everyone did a great job, but I thought the daughter also kind of stole the show as far as acting goes. I
mm-hmm.
thought she did an incredible job. And if you haven't seen this movie, it's totally worth seeing. It's amazing. It really is like
Yeah,
Bong Joon Ho at some of his best work.
yeah.
I would normally criticize this film for winning Best Picture. There weren't, I think, a lot of other good films at the time. It was around the time it won this was during the Stop Asian Hate thing. It felt, as the Academy can do, a little. It could have been a film where it was like we're just giving it an award, but it's totally deserving because it's
Yes.
so unbelievably good.
Yes.
So, and the ending sticks with you in
Yeah, it sticks with you.
so many of his movies.
Yeah. And he does irony really well. Most of this
Yes.
movie is very dark
Hmm.
in terms of how it is shot. All the scenes, again, there's a lot of rain. It's all done at night. And then the last scene, which is easily the most horrific, is done
Oh,
in broad daylight.
yeah, unbelievable. If
Yeah.
you haven't seen it, you have to go watch it. By the way, Parasite is my second favorite Bong Joon
Okay.
Ho film.
What's
I saw it
what
in
is your third?
theaters, and I'll always remember that viewing. And it was the second Bong Joon Ho film I'd seen, and it was great. Okay,
Which was the first that you saw of his?
it was Snowpiercer, and I had no
Yeah.
idea he directed it. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So So what do we have? We both had The Host at 5. We both had Mother at 4. We're tabling
Hmm.
Snowpiercer because you that was a tie for you. You had Parasite at 3. I had it at 2. We'll move into my third favorite. And I will say that the top 3 films for me are all relatively perfect movies.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can go wrong ranking these films.
Hmm.
3 for me was Memories of Murder.
Oh
And
man, it's so good.
I actually couldn't even believe how good this movie is. It was made in 2004, but let's keep in mind South Korea clearly didn't have the, I want to say, like, the film crispness, like the resolution that it feels like our 2004 films had at the time.
Hmm.
Also, the movie is shot back in, it feels like, the 80s or something like
Yes.
that. So it works really well like that, where everything's a little grainy, a little dark.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe how much I enjoyed this movie. I will
Yeah.
say it probably has a slower start than most, but it
Hmm.
lines up with his films in that 45-minute to hour range when you feel like you really have a grasp on everything. That makes the last hour of viewing where you don't want to stop watching because it's so good.
It's so good.
I don't want to
How much
say,
did you
oh, sorry, go ahead.
how much did you know about this movie before you watched it? I
Zero.
knew
I knew
nothing.
absolutely nothing. And that was pretty
Yeah.
much my goal going into this. And I would, for those of you who haven't watched it, I would compare it closest to David Fincher's Zodiac.
Yeah.
But I think Zodiac's a great film. This is better in my opinion. I think it's just more masterfully done. Um, all the characters come full circle so well. And you're on edge the whole time, and it is, of all the films, we've talked about his humor and his dark humor. Of all the films, this film might have what are some of the most serious implications, as far as for those of you who don't know, it's basically a killer is on the loose in this small town, and they are targeting women. Usually, when it rains, it would appear a certain color they might be wearing. And anyways, they're putting these clues together because every time this happens in this small town, a woman is getting assaulted and murdered. And
Yeah.
of all the films, it has such a serious undertone. But I laughed out loud multiple times during this film. He's
Yeah.
able to go from these heavy, serious scenes to like a cut, and then the next shot is something so funny, like the guy who's always doing the interrogating, who has a short fuse, who's always jumping up and just kicking
He's always
people,
just air kicking
always air
somebody in the
kicking,
chest.
and every time he air kicks someone, I laughed harder and harder and harder, and it has such a tragic ending for him and for characters, and it's like it comes so full circle with him and with everyone. But I burst out loud laughing multiple times in
Yes.
this film, which felt inappropriate considering how tense the film was and that it's
Hmm.
based off a real story, which I didn't know until afterwards. But
Yeah.
unbelievable that a film could do that to you, is pull you in.
Yes.
That's so heavy, but also make you laugh somehow out loud,
Yes.
as almost
Yes.
never happened to me. So, incredible film. I don't even want to spoil anything about it because it's so
Hmm.
good. But what are your any additional thoughts on Memories of Murder?
Yes.
And where did you have it
This
ranked?
is this movie. It was such a toss up. This movie was almost my number one.
Okay.
It 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 honestly it would flip on the day. That's where I'm
Okay.
at with this movie. Where this is out of the movies you had mentioned that Mother haunts you. Memories of Murder haunts me.
Yeah.
Again, a huge part of this movie is, I mean, we have the benefit of being Americans and not having the context for the real life story
Hmm.
of this. But when you find out later, you are just along for the ride the
Yes.
whole time.
Yes.
And you feel how much the odds are against the policeman. And again, you see this you see this moral complexity, if you want to put it that way, or again, just this humanity that is in this police department where they
It's a mess.
also,
It's a
yeah, it's
mess.
a total
It's a
disaster. The
mess.
very first scene is this crime scene where they essentially are trying to pin it on,
A
again,
mentally
another
handicapped
person,
person.
yeah, another person with special needs. And the dad of the handicapped person comes out and says, "Hey, do not confess to anything. You did nothing. We know you did nothing." And they're like, "Oh, we're gonna pin it on him, gonna pin it on him." And the crime scene bursts into absolute chaos. There's all of these people, again, there's all of these spectators
It makes me
watching.
laugh just thinking about it because it's
They
such a
all rush
mess.
into this rice field and destroy
All
all of
the
the evidence.
evidence.
And
Oh,
it's a disaster the whole time, and you're seeing it both through this kind of small town police department, and also someone from Seoul comes in to kind of help piece the parts together because the main cop, again, same guy who is the dad in The Host and is the dad in Parasite, right? Same
yeah,
guy.
yeah, he is.
And he's playing
Also
this
in
role where he
Snowpiercer. Also in Snowpiercer.
also in Snowpiercer, that's right. And he's also an Okja, actually.
Okay.
But so I have his name written, but I don't know how to pronounce it. But if you saw his face, you'd know who he
Yes,
was.
you would.
Um, and his whole thing is he's like, "Oh, I'm like a shaman. I can like look into someone's eyes and I
Yes.
can tell if they're guilty."
Yes.
And he's not using any of it. But the whole time you are truly on the ropes of, are they going to catch them?
Yeah.
Because there are several failed investigations, and then how all the
Brilliantly
pieces,
failed too. They're all
yeah,
wonderfully failed. Like it's also
yeah.
oh, yeah. Go
The
sorry.
last the He's so good at just the last scenes
Yes.
in all of his movies where
Yes.
they just stick with you. Even I know that we put Snowpiercer aside, but they walk out into the snow and they see the polar bear is so powerful. Here, the suspect walks down the train, like down the train tunnel and disappears. And then that last scene, you're just looking at Detective Park's face looking back at you.
Yes. I had to look that up and that like it gives me goosebumps. You just mentioned it is breaking that fourth wall. And I read something.
You can't spoil it. You can't
Yeah,
spoil
I'm not
it.
gonna say anything. I'm not gonna say anything.
Yeah.
Um,
This is the movie I would most recommend, frankly, of anyone to watch.
I'm very close to backing you on that. Of watching these films over the last couple of weeks, that's the movie that has come out of my mouth to everybody who asked for film recommendations. I say you need to go watch this, and no one's watched it
Yes.
because it's a foreign film and they've never
Right.
heard of it.
And
But
It's kind of
I'm on the
hard to
same
find
boat where I'm
online.
like, yes, go watch it on Tubi. It's free.
It's free. Yeah. We love Tubi.
Okay.
All right.
Memories of Murder, amazing. And that was your what rank was that for you?
That was two.
That was two. Okay.
It was hard for me to put it at two. It really was.
Okay. And Parasite was my two. So that brings us to our one, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So your one, oh dear Lord. Oh my gosh. I don't even. Go ahead. Just tell me. Just get it over with. Unbelievable.
My my number one is Mickey 17.
Unbelievable. I can't even
And
believe this is happening right now.
I watched this movie 2 Fridays ago,
Recency
and
bias. I'm just going to point
there
this
is
out.
a huge recency
Recency
bias. This
bias.
Bong Joon Ho is also very good at it's pretty much every other one of his movies is a little bit lighter hearted. We have Okja, very lighthearted. The Host is arguably lighthearted. Mickey 17 is the same way where it's dark. This movie, Mickey 17 was kind of made for me. It feels like it is so me
Oh,
coded in
isn't
terms
that
of
nice
how
for you,
how
Kenny?
weird and funny and lighthearted it is. There's a whole philosophical argument about the whole premise of Mickey 17. This is from the trailer, this is not a spoiler. This guy signs up to basically flee the planet because he's trying to leave a loan shark. So he's trying to get off planet Earth. In order to get off planet Earth, he has no skills whatsoever. So he signs up for the Expendables program. And basically, what they do is they scan his body, they take all of his genetic DNA, they download all of his memory, and they're able to, when he dies, reprint him with all of his memory, including the memory of his death. And so he's able to pick back up right where he left off. And they basically 3D print him out of this thing. And it's pretty much him talking about how, you know, there's this hilarious montage. I don't even know how to not spoil this movie. There's a hilarious montage of he's the 17th Mickey, right? So he has died 16 times.
Okay.
And there's a whole montage about how he
All
dies.
these
And
ways.
it's just
Okay.
it's so funny, it's so nonchalant. A lot of it has to do with the scientific experiment of, hey, what would your body do if it was exposed to the vacuum of space? Or, hey, we want to like test this deadly virus on you in order to like come up with a serum and all of this stuff. And
Gotcha.
it is so funny, so heartwarming. He falls in love with this girl, and this girl loves him through all of his different versions.
Hmm.
And I find that really fun. There's there's some hijinks that happens because they land on this planet, this ice planet, and they think that Mickey had died, and he hadn't died, and they printed another one of him. So now there are two Mickeys. There are 17 and 18, and the whole movie is the hijinks of Mickey 17 and 18. And there's just some really funny moments because she isn't entirely sure. Like you would think that she isn't sure about where she stands in terms of, oh wait, do I love 17 or 18?
Okay,
And
gotcha.
just
Yeah.
like she flips the
Okay.
whole thing on
So,
her. Yeah.
it sounds like an interesting concept. I was gonna
Yeah.
watch it, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. But I will watch it at some point. So I can't
Hmm.
rank it. I will say here's my three things. Does Robert Pattinson being in now a Bong Joon Ho film is that the climax of his comeback? Is he now that he went from being Edward in Twilight and nobody thought about him forever, no one cared about him. He comes out and makes a few indie films, then he becomes the Batman that like he's been gone
Hmm.
long enough that everyone's like, I'm on board with Robert Pattinson. Then he was in a Christopher Nolan film, Tenet
Yeah,
as one of the main
Tenant.
characters. Bong Joon Ho film now.
Yeah.
Is it too
He
much
was in a
Robert
Robert Eggers
Pattinson?
movie. He was in The Lighthouse.
Right, The Lighthouse. I didn't get to see the last 15 minutes of it, but I watched everything up until then. So
I think that
does
to
this
answer your
complete his
question,
comeback? Is he like the guy right now? Is he the
dude,
best
I think
guy that's not 18 and named Timothy Chalamet?
I think that Robert Pattinson has been back for a while.
I know,
actually.
but I'm saying he's just added another one of the great directors
Yes.
to his
Oh,
notch.
totally. He's definitely he has another notch in his belt here because this is also a much different role than I have seen him in and everything else. In the Batman, he's Bruce Wayne. He's dark, he's brooding. He plays that very well where his Bruce Wayne persona is actually very compelling to me as just this greasy,
Very
uh,
greasy.
someone who people actually wouldn't really want to hang out with, which is
Right.
like, yeah, that actually rings really true for someone who spends his nights being Batman. I
Right.
also probably wouldn't want to hang out with that guy during the day.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, all I'm gonna
he's
say is odds for him being in a Wes Anderson film are shooting through the roof. That's all
oh
I'm
my
gonna
gosh,
say.
yes. And this film, he has. I actually that was one of the first things I thought of is. Holy crap, he's playing like why was he not in Asteroid City? He totally could have been in he could have
Everyone else
totally could have been in this
was,
movie.
and that
He
movie
is he
passed.
is so funny in this movie. There are so many hijinks that I know the movie's still kind of new coming out, so
Yeah,
I'm
don't
not gonna
spoil it.
spoil
I'm gonna
it.
go watch it. Okay.
Yeah. There are a
Um.
few the one thing I will say, the little aliens, which I've gotten a lot of feedback that says people love the creepers. They love that they're like cute and cuddly and they kind of give off Okja a little bit in terms of it's kind of gross, but it's kind of cute. I just find them super gross all the way around. I
Okay.
like they give me the chills. They give me like like the troglodyte vibes emanating from the creepers. That was a no go on me.
Here's a few other things. My perspective as an outsider to some of the other film reviewers that I like to follow have mostly given this a slightly negative review.
Interesting.
So I was, and it did, and I don't care about this often, but I also saw that it came in as Bong Joon Ho's lowest reviewed film on Rotten Tomatoes, which I found
Hmm.
interesting. I will also throw this at you. The film had a $118 million budget. It's his
Yeah.
biggest budget. 150 million about went to marketing, so about 275 million dollars. The movie is on pace to likely finish with a 100 million dollar plus loss at the
Yeah.
box office, and to
Yeah.
hit digital at home
In
streaming services
17 days.
very fast. So,
Yeah.
not to knock your pick, I haven't
Yeah.
seen it. I can't judge it, but I will say, one, it makes me nervous for him. I wonder if studios are going to be more apprehensive to give someone like him the green light because his ideas are so different. Uh, then,
I I think that we could have like a broader discussion about box office because the same thing was said about Denis Villeneuve, right? Where he releases Blade Runner 2049,
mhm.
huge budget, huge production, known IP,
Yeah, but
and it just
Blade Runner, come on, it's like the lowest of the known IPs, I would say.
true. In
Um,
this movie, I'm just
and I will say this, I will say that.
to me it reflects more poorly on the average movie going audience. Not I'm not trying to be like, oh my gosh,
No,
all these
no, no,
people all they want to do
that
is watch superhero
no, I
movies.
understand. That is what I'm saying. I think the studios are going to step back and say, I don't think a lot of people can handle his unique ideas at a grand
Hmm.
scale. I don't think 95% of people want to watch Mother, Parasite, Memories of Murder. I think it's the films, and again, like you were just saying, I don't want to sound like I'm on a pedestal or something, but
Hmm.
they're just more complicated. They're just more well done. They're just so differently paced, as you pointed out, and everything's
Yeah,
different about them, which is what makes them so
yeah.
awesome to watch. But
This movie has that same, like, the more I'm thinking about my exponential scene theory, the more
is
this
it in
Mickey
tune as
17
well?
also has that, where it
Okay.
just starts speeding up and crazy things start happening.
Okay.
And
I'll
yeah,
say this
I,
about the budget too, just for comparison.
yeah.
Parasite made $50 million, not a lot,
Hmm.
on a $10 million budget. So
Yeah,
just food for thought. Food
right.
for thought there.
Yeah. It was definitely a risk on the budget side. I think that we knew that. If I remember right, the production company is it Neon? Do you know off the
No,
top
I'm
of your
not
head?
sure.
Um, they
Will
it's
not be
either
around for
actually
much longer.
it's either Neon or A24 and two indie movie studios. So I think that they are willing to take a little bit more of the risk. I hope they continue to take the risk. I think that he is great. He's a super likable guy. If you've ever like heard an interview from him, he is just so charming. He is so fun. And yeah, the Mickey 17 being number one, I think probably is going to be a divisive pick just because this movie just really hits my sensibilities so strongly. Mark Ruffalo and oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the person who plays his wife in this movie. I see her face so clearly, but they're hamming it up. They are so funny and they're so weird, and you're like, yeah, this person would like flee Earth in order to like start this weird colony.
Okay. So you
Yeah.
have
Anyway,
your one as Mickey 17. I will get to it when I can. My number one is Snowpiercer.
whoa,
Yeah. I have seen it
whoa.
3 times.
Oh
I
man.
think it's a,
Okay, okay, we can talk about it.
yeah, I think, and I know it's your fourth, tied for fourth. I think it is one of my all time favorite movies. I think it is a perfect movie from beginning to end. I watched it the first time I saw it with no idea of what it was going to be.
Mhm.
Saw this movie with Chris Evans, and I was like, I'll throw it on. The movie got like no marketing, like no one knew about this film. It was just out of nowhere. And I watched it, and I remember my jaw just dropping from beginning to end of the film. Of all his
Mhm.
films, we talk about the ramp up. Of all his films, this one puts a firecracker up your butt in the first 5 minutes, and
This
it's
movie's
high
fast paced the
octane.
whole
It's high
time.
octane the whole way, and it fits with Snowpiercer and the whole idea about the world is ending because of climate change, and this crazy super genius made a train because he loved automotives that goes around the world, and there's an entire socioeconomic system from the last cart being the super low class to the front cart and everything existing in between. I think it is one of the
Mhm.
coolest ideas, most unique ideas I've ever seen come to
Mhm.
life and work. And his color in the film hits, his costumes hit, all the
The set
acting is, the
design,
set design is
oh,
unbelievable. You get
all the different carts on this train are so unique,
yes.
and it's so interesting, as someone who works in I'm a design engineer. I work in construction. I work with a lot of architects, and just seeing how they chose to lay out some of these cars is so fascinating and so interesting. And also the camera work within
Oh, the camera work's
you never feel like
unbelievable.
you're in a big box. You
No,
always feel
no.
tight.
It
It's always and the whole
except
movie is lean.
for maybe when you're in the low class cart, and that's how it's supposed to be, right? Is it
Yeah,
supposed to feel claustrophobic and dark and broody and
yeah.
dirty? Has probably the some of the most memorable scenes for me. There's like one of the coolest scenes I've ever seen in film, and the tenseness where they're gonna die, or sorry, they're not gonna die. They might. They're are fighting those dudes with the axes, and
Yeah, the night
the
vision.
night and oh, we're about to hit a tunnel. Get ready. Oh, but guess what? We already know that, so we're putting the goggles on. And then we have Tilda Swinton randomly in this movie too, do an amazing job, and she's like, everything is so calculated down to a T that they have a measurable for the revolts. And she says, she gets it out. She goes, "Hey, I just got the message before this fight takes place. Make sure you want to do it because if it does, 66% of you will die."
Right.
And
It's all so calculated and told.
unbelievable. And then the scene where it's like the train takes a bend and it's like you're seeing someone from the other side of the window. It's unbelievable. Another movie where there's constant twists. You don't know how long characters that seem like they're main characters, like Tilda Swinton, Octavia
Right.
Spencer's in this movie. She's great. You don't
Yeah.
know how long they are going to last for, right?
Yeah.
And I just think of all his films, it's the most fun to me,
Mm-hmm.
while also being the most impactful, uh, explaining that socioeconomic difference, right?
Yes.
Parasite is the heaviest for that, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
the Academy Award of that. But the fun version that actually would be appealing to most American viewers
Yeah.
is grasped in this film. And the reason it's
Yeah.
one for me is if I were to recommend a single Bong Joon Ho film to any random person on the street, it has to be this movie. And I can't
Yeah. Yeah.
imagine most people, almost anyone watching this film, and as long as they're a mature adult, like not enjoying this film
Mm-hmm.
or not taking something from it in some way, form, or another. So that is
Yeah.
why I love Snowpiercer. I've seen it 3 times. Every time it's been a 10 for me. And
Yeah.
so there's my
That
rant on
is
Snowpiercer.
I'm not very good at developing a methodology really for how much I like a movie, but I'm starting to develop it more and more. And something, if I am rating a movie between like 4 and 5, 4.5 and 5, the thing that makes a movie a 5 for me is exactly what you said. It's honestly the rewatchability factor.
Yeah.
If I can go back and I can rewatch a movie any single time, again, Snowpiercer isn't quite there for me personally, just in terms of the other things that I really liked about these other films. Again, this is still an incredible movie. There's so many. I feel like I've used the word visceral a lot on this podcast, but where they're eating the weird licorice, like black
The gel
licorice.
blocks. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, that's so gross. Is is this Chris Evans' best non-Captain America performance?
Oh,
The only
definitely.
other thing I can think of is like his performance in Knives Out.
Oh, yeah. And it wasn't as good as this. He didn't have to uh,
Carry the
carry the load. Like he is the
yeah.
main character and he is the driving force and is a human Captain America in a much more dire situation. And
Yeah.
I also would say one of the reasons I love it too is just there are few times in the filmmaking world you will see such a unique idea executed at such a high level. I would compare it to something like different, but compare it to something like Inception, like something we
Mm.
haven't seen before. Like, there's a lot of people who are like, Interstellar is like I love Interstellar. It's one of my favorite Chris Nolan movies. People say that it's not one of mine. Like I like it, but like it's like oh, Chris Nolan made a movie about space, and like you could have watched. I could have told you what that would have been about, and you would have been like, yeah, okay, I could see all that happening.
Hmm.
Inception is something if you haven't heard of it or know what happens, it's like it's an unbelievable idea that you almost can't even comprehend how it's going to be filmed, how it's going
Hmm.
to look, and how it's going to be done, and how it's going to work. Not only an insane idea and plot, but how it's going to execute it to where it's an
Yeah.
enjoyable thing to watch. So,
Yeah. Integrate, if I remember right, this Snowpiercer is based off of, I don't think it's called Snowpiercer, but it's based off of a book, right? It's an adaptation.
I'm not sure. It might be. They also made a TV show of it that I think is still running,
Right.
which I
But
don't care for, but
he, this, if I'm right on that, if Snowpiercer is an
like a
adaptation
graphic
of Mickey
novel or something.
17 or a graphic novel,
Yeah.
he does adaptations really, really well, and he picks them super well. Where he's like, "Oh, this is a really interesting idea. I want to bring this to life. I want to bring this to the silver screen." That is so. It's so interesting. It's so fun. It's a very
It is based off.
fun. Is it fun? Is this
It's.
movie fun?
Oh, I think it's
It's a
fun.
great time. It's a total
Yeah,
blast. But it's like,
it's based
oh,
off a French
fun.
graphic novel, and yes,
Okay.
I think of all of his films. It's the only film I found fun. I haven't seen Mickey 17, so it feels like Mickey
Yeah.
17 also falls in that category.
Is the novelist Luc Besson?
Um, Written by Jacques Loeb and illustrated
Oh,
by
man,
Jean-Marc Roche.
I was about to go off on another Valerian City of a Thousand Planets rant, but I guess I don't get to do that.
Anyways,
Yeah.
we are getting tight on time, so we should
Yeah.
probably wrap this up. But
Okay. So your rankings.
yeah, my rankings were The Host at 5, Mother at
Hmm.
4, Memories of Murder at 3, Parasite at 2, and Snowpiercer at 1. And
Yeah.
yours?
And mine was Host at 5, Snowpiercer and Mother at 4, Parasite at 3, Memories of Murder at 2, and Mickey 17 at 1. Man, I want to give Memories of Murder a tied number 1
Yeah,
too, but
they're
we have
also
to stick
good.
to it. We have to stick to a tiered list. That's the
Yes.
rule of the podcast.
Yes, that's the rule of the podcast. Even though Kenny slipped 6 films into his top 5 rankings. Anyways, we hope you all enjoyed today's discussion. If you haven't seen a Bong Joon Ho film, go fix your life and make that happen. Please follow us, rate us, share us, send feedback. We only have 7 subscribers right now. Where our goal is 10, and we're gonna
Goal is 10.
our other goal is on Friday. We are going to do a review / reaction to the season 2 finale of Severance. We're going to try and live stream for the first time on Twitch and YouTube at the same time. We will see how that works out. Probably disastrous.
It's gonna be a great time.
Until then, I see here I'm supposed to thank our loyal and intimate fan base. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.